Hello, everybody, and welcome to our podcast series where we explore ways to support and empower youth in leading healthier lives. I'm MacDonald, and I'll be your host for this journey into topics that matter to today's youth. In each episode, we'll dive into discussions about physical health, mental well-being, professional development, and more. Our goal is to provide valuable insights, tips, and inspiration to help you live your best life. Through interviews with experts and practical advice, we aim to equip you with the tools needed to make positive choices and create a healthier future. So whether you're looking to become healthier, manage stress, or navigate your path to professional success, join us as we embark on this empowering journey together. Get ready to live well and thrive, one episode at a time. Welcome to the Live Well podcast series, empowering youth to live healthier lives. I'm your host, MacDonald, and in today's episode, we explore navigating through periods of isolation and uncertainty with our guest, Taylor Walsh. Taylor is the counseling therapist and owner of Kindred Counselling in Charlottetown, PEI. In her practice, Taylor supports youth and adults in managing symptoms of anxiety and depression, building self-esteem, and navigating challenging relationship and life situations. Feeling alone is a common experience, but there is a lifeline of support available. Let's explore the crucial role of professional assistance during challenging times and the invaluable support that connections with friends and family can provide. Let's dive in. Taylor, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me. Happy to be here.
I guess I can ask you how you're doing today. Doing good?
Yeah, I'm doing well.
Sweet. All right.
Thanks.
So Taylor, how do you think young individuals can discern between feeling lonely and experiencing mental health issues?
Yeah, I think this is a great question to start with. And first, I guess I want to talk about what mental health is. I think a lot of times there's a misconception that being mentally healthy means to be feeling good all the time and to feel positive and happy and content and peaceful. When really mental health is having the ability to experience a full range of emotions, right? And then also to be able to cope with them in a healthy and appropriate way. So loneliness falls into this category, right, of all of the feelings. Also, I like to talk with clients about how feelings are like messengers. It's information that we are getting from our bodies and from our minds. And for example, loneliness, the message behind that or the underlying need is often the lack of feeling connected to the people around us or experiencing a sense of belonging. That being said, we all feel feelings of loneliness sometimes. So I came up with this example of, when we're scrolling Instagram, I think that's a
Right.
pretty common experience, and you're seeing photos of friends or peers and they're getting together and they're having a lot of fun, and we're seeing all of this from our home where we're sitting by ourselves. And I think that would be a normal and common experience where some feelings of loneliness might be stirred up. So, keeping in mind loneliness as the lack of connection and feeling of belonging, some healthy responses to this might be to exit Instagram and reach out to a friend, or leave our bedrooms and go talk to somebody in our family or in our household that we live with, and find connection through there, or even find a pet and force some sense of connection with them.
Exactly. I mean,
um,
I definitely feel the
yeah.
exact same way. All constantly, using social media. I have got rid of most of my social media as I've aged slightly out of some of my old friend circles. I've kind of moved on and gotten rid of a couple different social medias, and I'm definitely not going to speak for everybody, but I have been in that spot where you scroll through, just like you're saying, scrolling through social media, and you see somebody else who's you assume is living in the moment as a very happy person, and you compare yourself to
Mhm.
their lives, and it's just not really a fair comparison to do constantly, right? Especially in like the quiet moments where you are just looking at your phone. So, I was
Yeah.
doing it a second ago, so it's not fair to yourself really to make that comparison.
Yeah.
So
No,
yeah,
exactly.
I love that example. That's a great example.
Yeah. Um, Thanks for saying that, Max. It's
No problem at all.
also, yeah, it's important too, because there are also sort of unhealthy ways that someone can respond to those feelings of loneliness stirred up by seeing those pictures. Like you said, it's not always a realistic um, view of what other people are doing or how they're feeling, but that's kind of what we interpret from these photos. So some unhealthy responses to this feeling of loneliness that you get sometimes might be to continue sort of doom scrolling, as they say,
Mm.
where you sort of just dwell in that feeling of loneliness, or to further isolate themselves, close the door to their room and not engage with the other people in their household.
Mm.
Um, or sometimes this can even turn into moments where a teen is coping by harming themselves or turning to substances to cope. It really just depends on the situation, but I just wanted to kind of highlight the difference between what healthy coping versus unhealthy coping might look like in that setting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you mentioned some of the things that are unhealthy signs of coping. Can these be construed as some of the signs that someone might need professional help?
Yeah. Yeah. I think there are definitely some normal ups and downs that teens are going to experience in terms of their moods. Um, right? That part of their brain that's developing for emotional regulation, it's still in progress. And so we know that for teens, ups and downs in their mood is going to be more rapid and dramatic than it will be in other stages of life.
Right.
Um, but yeah, you're so right that if you're seeing these sort of changes in mood that are sticking, if a teen's isolating themselves or kind of starting to engage in behaviors that are harmful or unusual for them, or they are turning to self harm or using substances to cope, those
Mhm.
would be signs. Sometimes they're more subtle than other times, that they might need some extra support.
Gotcha. Self-harm seems like a pretty clear barrier between what is uh, somewhere where you don't need professional help versus do want to seek professional help. That seems like a clear line. What's
Yeah.
slightly less clear to me is substance use, because as we know, there's plenty of people who grow up, use substances, move on in their lives just fine. There's some that don't. Is there anything in substance abuse that for you is a sign that they need to seek more professional help or that it's time to try to change their habits?
Yeah, I think that's a great question too, because, you know, teenagehood is a time for experimentation, and we kind of know that some teens will choose to kind of dabble.
Yeah.
I think that when we know a teen well enough to know what's normal and what's unusual for them,
Hmm.
or whenever we see them using on an extremely regular basis, or if they're using substances by themselves, or if they're overusing them to the point of abusing them, where they are, putting themselves in dangerous situations because of these substances. It's
Right.
definitely something to keep an eye out for, even if a teen is doing some normal experimenting. Yeah, just to make sure that they're still being safe with it.
Right. The experimentation is something that I'm aware probably happens all awful lot of the time, but the solo use would definitely be something that I think would also be part of that hard line as
Mm-hmm.
well. So
Yeah,
thanks for clearing that up. I
yeah.
do think that that's one of the most difficult things when someone's determining whether or not they should seek out some kind of help, is figuring out, do I need to yet?
Mm-hmm.
Because there is still some sort of stigma that exists around seeking out help as well. Is there anything you've seen that's helped break down the stigma around seeking mental help?
Yeah, I think that, teens more so from when we were teenagers, there's a lot more sort of mental health awareness and literacy. And so I think that in itself, where teens are more aware that they have mental health, what it is, and some just general signs. I think in some ways that can be a benefit even of social media, is just that
Mm.
education piece that is kind of coming through. But yeah, in terms of stigma, it definitely still does exist. And I think it's a tricky thing. I'm sure it depends on the person and their own family experiences with mental health and seeking support, and their peer groups too.
Exactly, right. Who you
Yeah.
run with. In your experience, what role does professional counseling play in supporting young people during challenging times?
Yeah. Another great question. In my experience, the therapeutic relationship, or in other words, the relationship that a counselor has with the teens that they're working with is such an important factor, right? It's kind of a unique relationship in that it's in a space and it is a relationship designated to support the teen. There's no other layers to it. So it's built on trust and non-judgment, and sometimes too, it can take a while to build that trust. And that's okay in working with teens, especially to prioritize autonomy and giving them lots of choice and say in what's discussed, while maintaining sort of the goal of helping them with whatever they're struggling with.
Exactly.
Yeah. So when I'm working with a teen, we'll spend probably the first few sessions just getting to know each other. Sometimes that is just on a surface basis, but it's all with the intention of building that trust.
Mm-hmm.
And then as we go, we find a balance of, exploring the teen's experience with sprinkling in some practical coping strategies that are relevant to what they're going through.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you find that coping is probably the developing or the development of unproductive coping strategies? Do you find that to be the most common thing you see in your practice?
I have seen it before. I don't know if it's the most common thing, but I don't know. Teens aren't given a rule book on how to navigate every single challenging situation that they're going through. And so sometimes they do just need that outsider's perspective, or, some practical tools on how to navigate. I'm trying to think of an example.
It is challenging on top of the confidentiality part of your job as well.
Yeah, exactly. I think that the confidentiality part, I lay it out at the beginning of the session where legally this is the rule, and usually a parent or guardian will attend the first session, and together we make the rules on what communication is going to happen between me and the parent, and just saying that the teen is welcome to share whatever they want with whoever they want. They can share their experiences as far and wide as they want to. So there's a lot of safety, I think, in that confidentiality.
Right. That's super important too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Speaking of loved ones in general, how do you think friends and family can best support someone that's going through a difficult period emotionally and mentally?
It can be tough for people, I think, to know how to support somebody that they love who's going through a hard time. The most challenging thing, I think, is that we can't help somebody who doesn't want help or who isn't ready for help. Mm-hmm. So keeping that in mind, if we see somebody that we love who's struggling, or they're feeling stuck, or they're engaging in some of those behaviors that we had talked about that are harmful, or harmful either to themselves or to other people, we can start by just opening the door to a conversation. We could say something like, "Hey, I've been noticing that you haven't been seeming quite like yourself lately. If there's anything you want to talk about or any supports that you might need, know that I'm here for you." Mm-hmm. Right? That could be a way that we open the door to a conversation and let them come to us whenever they're ready.
Absolutely. Yeah. Trying to help that person realize for themselves, they might not even know that they're acting differently in some way, because it's hard to look at your life in a way to take a step back, especially for a young person, look at your life or your behavior from a perspective that somebody else might see it. So I see that it's trying to make the person aware that they might need help. They might be seeking it in some way.
Yeah. And just even to help them feel seen a little bit, that, oh, you don't have to be going through whatever it is all by yourself. You have me. And there will be teens that are completely closed off to any sort of support. That's probably the toughest situation. There are going to be other teens that are open to having a conversation with, their loved ones or a family friend or their parents. And then there will be sort of some that fall into the middle, where maybe they're not open to talking with somebody in their life, but maybe they're open to some outside support.
Right.
So just again, to give them as much choice as they have in the matter. I guess I wanted to say too, if there is like a crisis or an emergency or an imminent risk that the child is going to seriously harm themselves, that you can call 911 or go to the emergency room. If you have that um, maybe gut feeling, or you're getting sort of some clues from your teen that something's really not right and we need immediate support, know that that's an option. There's structures in place.
Yep, and that exists for the individual as well. It doesn't have to be somebody else calling for you.
Yes,
You can call that yourself and seek that out. That's also a thing you can do. So it's very
exactly.
important that we have those supports in place. Is there anything that you wanted to add, that you wanted to just say for the record for anybody who's listening to this podcast in the future? Any advice you might have?
Sure. I guess just still on the branch of friends and family supporting.
Sure.
I think that a big part of this is to stay calm yourself, and no matter where the teen is at and their openness to receiving support, you can always seek support for yourself too, because it is a challenging place to see somebody that you love struggling, and maybe by you either seeking social supports if you have that network, or by seeking professional support for yourself, that can set a good example
Mhm.
for the teen that is struggling. um, Also, using active listening skills is important whenever you're having those sort of tender conversations, just to help the teen feel really heard and understood.
Mhm.
And also to resist judgment or jumping into problem solving mode. Um, those can be ways that encourage the teen to be closed off again, if they're
Yeah,
not ready for solutions, or they don't want to feel judged or hear your opinions on whatever they're going through.
exactly. Sometimes you just want to say how you're feeling and not hear anything back. Not hear any kind of sort of constructive criticism back. It's not
Mm-hmm.
really what you're trying to get out of that. You're just trying to say something to someone who you love.
Yeah,
Yeah, I know what
exactly.
that's like. Yeah. I'm with the Charlottetown Youth Engagement Council. I got placed there about a year ago, or a little bit more than a year ago. And this is one of the podcasts we're doing. I wanted to do it because I have somewhat of a background working with children, like with
Mm-hmm.
school age kids and teens as well. And so this was a very particular episode for me in terms of trying to find support for young people. So I want to go back and just go back over the discerning between emotions and social, and particularly the emotions you feel while maybe going through social media and comparing your life to somebody else's.
Yeah.
So on that topic, you said one of your things was just to seek out other people in your life that you have an actual personal connection with. Do you think that's important as well, for not just for like when you're feeling down after social media, when you're feeling down in general? I think seeking out your friends or your family is a good option as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great option. I think that, a lot of times feelings can kind of overlap, right? Like if we're feeling lonely, that can bring up feelings of sadness, or even feelings of anger, maybe that you're left out.
Mm,
Um, so, yeah, reaching out to the people in your circle, whether you have a really big circle of people to draw from, or you just have even one or two that you
mhm.
can reach out to. We aren't made to be by ourselves. We thrive in community. That's kind of what we're built for as humans. Um,
Right,
and so we can sort of get so much by getting out of our head and connecting with other people.
right. And those
Yeah.
feelings we feel, oftentimes, do you find that you mentioned earlier that there is we're meant to experience a whole full spectrum of emotions. Do you think
Mm-hmm.
it's pretty normal for a person to go back and forth, right? To feel sad for a bit, feel happy for a bit, and vice versa? You think that's normal for people to feel sad one day, happy the next?
Yeah, absolutely. And emotions are kind of like waves,
Mm,
they rise and then they fall. And, sometimes it can feel like we're going to be stuck in one feeling forever, and it can be really overwhelming. But I think that by connecting with other people, like you said a minute ago, we can sort of let the feelings happen and come
Mhm.
out the other side and still maintain those connections.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And would that necessarily be one of the signs as well for professional help if you're feeling one kind of emotion for a long period of time?
Yeah. Yeah,
Gotcha.
definitely.
Okay. So that's a couple of things we've noticed that are signs for professional help, uh, substance use by yourself. What was the other one we mentioned at the very start of the podcast, the very first one?
Yeah. I mean, we talked about in that situation of the Instagram doom scrolling or further isolating themselves, um, not even attempting to make connections with other people at school or in the community.
Social
Um,
isolation.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Isolation, solo use.
I think too, it can be really hard for some people to, whether it's because of their personality or even if there's some like bullying happening, to make social connections.
Hmm.
And I think whenever there are those barriers to connection, or, I guess what I'm trying to say is it doesn't always have to be internal barriers. Sometimes there are external things that are making it really difficult to make connections with other people.
Hmm.
Um, and that is also something that a counselor, either a school counselor or somebody in private practice, can help navigate, or a family member might be able to be a support for somebody in a situation like that too.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to reach out to people around you. Let's go
Mm-hmm.
back to your professional counseling as well. I already asked what role it plays in supporting young people during challenging times, and you mentioned you do speak to the parents as well, but what sort of role do you do any help with the parents of any young people as well? Do you work with them outside of outside of their involvement in the first couple of meetings?
Mm-hmm. Not typically, unless there's something really of concern, or if I have consent from the teen client to have a meeting with their parent. Usually, I will, like, if I'm working with a teen and we think it's important that there's something that their parent should know, we'll invite the parent into the session so that all three of us are there. And at that point, it's my role then is to support my client while they communicate whatever it is that they may want to share with their parent. Yeah, I don't typically work with anybody that's related to my clients, just again to keep that safe, kind of safe for them and exclusive for them.
Right.
But I would encourage parents, if there is something sort of impacting the whole family, to seek their own support and provide support for them and through referrals or recommendations of where they can go for support.
Exactly. So you mentioned referrals. Do you get people referred to you through the public healthcare system or through clinics?
Usually, my referrals come from school counselors, or from parents or teens who are doing an online search.
Gotcha. Makes sense. You've
Yeah.
got that good search engine optimization. That's good to hear. Let's just talk about how empathy affects your interactions with any of your loved ones who maybe are having a mental health, who are having a mental health episode, or if they're not feeling like themselves lately.
Yeah. How empathy impacts the interactions that we have with them.
Yes.
Yeah. Um, hmm. If we think about empathy, it's really about feelings with the person that we're interacting with, right? So I think whenever we are trying to be empathetic, we can imagine maybe what it's like to be in the other person's shoes. And empathy inherently has that non judgment kind of woven into, right? Where we try to sort of put aside our own assumptions, and maybe we do have judgments about what somebody is going through, but kind of putting that aside and just being present for the person to feel what they're feeling for a few moments. That can, yeah, help the person feel less alone.
Right. Is that something that can be really taxing on the person who is who is trying to help as well?
Yes, I would
Yes.
say it can be because, yeah, it takes a lot of energy to be present fully with another person. And especially when that person is struggling, and if it's somebody that we love, we just want to be able to take that pain away from them. And so to be able to sit and witness it, it's hard because it's out of our control. Sometimes it's out of the other person's control, and we just have to be patient.
Could that also be uh, one of the things that we notice whenever we're looking for if someone should be seeking professional help, is if you yourself, as someone who's trying to help them, is feeling burnt out over there, is feeling burnt out with their empathy? Is that something we can keep in mind as well?
I think that's an important thing to keep in mind, because even if we're taking care of somebody else, we still need to care for ourselves, because if we are feeling burnt out, that limits our capacity to support the person.
Exactly.
So sometimes professional help is a part of that. And sometimes it's just even meeting our own basic needs for sleep, for eating. If we're staying up late at night worrying about this person, can we find strategies um, to cope with those worried thoughts? Can we use a journal, or can we have somebody for ourselves to talk to about how we're feeling, so that we don't take their load on to our own shoulders?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a lot to carry your own weight as well as somebody else's.
Exactly.
So Taylor, we've talked quite a bit about I think things that are very important about mental health and how to keep track of it and how to distinguish mainly between some of your normal emotions and some of the more extreme ones, or some of the more difficult aspects of when you should be trying to seek out more professional help or even just help from your friends. We also talked about what your role is as a counselor and how somebody might use your services and what they might try to get out of it. And lastly, we talked about how the loved ones of people who are seeking out your services can further support them outside of when they are not actively seeking help with you. And I think those are all very important things. And I just wanted to say thank you very much for sharing your valuable expertise and perspectives for seeking out mental support and mental health awareness. I just want to take a second to tell all of our listeners to prioritize your own mental health, seek support, and offer compassionate support to those around you whenever you can. And I just think that if none of those things work for you, you can reach out to Taylor, and she has some resources she'd like to share as well.
Yeah. If you have any questions or you wanted to reach out, you can contact me at Kindred Counselling PEI@gmail.com. Or you can look up, there's lots of counselors in Charlottetown and PEI listed on Psychology Today. And I think that we'll be able to link those both in the show notes.
Yes, in our description or show notes, whether we're on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube. Yes, any one of our descriptions, you should have some resources down there. And I just wanted to say thank you again, Taylor, for joining us on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
There's no problem at all. And we will see you on the next episode of the Living Well podcast.